So here we are officially, the Underground Utilities Mapping Project Team, March 25th, 2021. And our agenda is previously published. Highlights for today, we've got a presentation that we've recorded from Ian Ross of Scottish Vault, Bob Besquez, City of St. Paul, and then we're going to do a walkthrough of Group 1 and 2's flow chart, and then back to kind of the standard schedule. And with that, Barb, the floor is yours.
Yes, welcome everybody. As Steve says, we have a packed agenda today, and I think you'll find Ian's talk very exciting and interesting, as well as Bob's. I just wanted to update everybody on we submitted a paper, actually it'll be a panel discussion to the National CGA meeting, this year, October 12th through the 14th. And so we plan on presenting the Minnesota Underground Utility Mapping Team with the panel. And I think that's very exciting news just to really advertise and tell people where we're headed and what we've already accomplished. And by October, we should have just even more to talk about than we would have today. So I think that's very exciting. So with that, we'll get started.
Okay. For my comments, I've just got probably, as you can guess, I'm focused on the paperwork side of everything. Last time we were together, I asked you to give consideration to framing your efforts going forward, your discussions in your small groups focused on the concept of item discussion recommendation. I'm not going to beat it up here again. I've sent out basically a copy of the screen and to try to give the idea of what we're looking for there. You'll notice I've crossed off best practices at the top of this. That's because within the leadership group, we're thinking now that in consideration of where we're really headed with this thing, we may be looking at something that's more along the guidelines or in a team improvement kind of concept. And so that will gel as we go forward. And to kind of maybe help you have a better idea of how the pieces fit together, I also forwarded a document, but I just want to make some brief comments here. I will begin the actual structure development of the document ahead of any input from the groups, because much of it can be, if you will, put into place in advance. And so the walkthrough of the document as agreed to, and of course this is flexible like water going down a river, but our starting point with this is basically on the left-hand side, you see the walkthrough of cover. Next section would be administrative handling, which is like changes to the document, if there are any restrictions on how it's distributed, that sort of thing. Table of contents standard, list of figures standard. Executive summary takes basically the body of the discussion that follows in items 6, 7, and 8 and brings it forward for executives as a standard protocol with them. They'll grab and read what typically runs no more than about 6 pages of a discussion that really boils everything else that follows down. And if they wanted to get into the more details on a particular item, it allows them to dig through sections 6, 7, and 8. So section 6 would be issues overview, sort of the history of the UUMPT, and then what efforts we looked at, kind of technologies that were considered, just a flavor of what that piece looks like. And then the piece that would be there from the group discussions, it'll really more or less boil down into sort of 3 general categories: the collection of data, our vision for sharing of data, and then the regulatory piece. And that's going to be your input part of how that fits into the overall structure. And then from that, we'll take that and boil it down into what would be called the Minnesota Improvement Plan, tentatively right now, rather than best practices. And then a conclusion, references, and indexes. In parallel, there'll be 4 appendixes. The first appendix, it doesn't do any good to do any of this stuff if we just snapshot it in time and be done with it. So I'm dragging forward from a past life experience that's known as a safety survey. And we would want to frame this as a self-assessment protocol for whoever it may be, excavator, one call center, to be able to periodically go through and self-assess how their operation is going. And that's a way to as an ongoing matter, provide a way for people to improve safety on their own. Appendix B, if in that item discussion area you run into a place where it's really worthwhile diving down into, how trons are shared or something of that nature, that's of highly technical nature, there will be an appendix available for that. And then Appendix C, regulatory review, primarily driven by, what our regulatory team is looking at. We're looking to provide a grid there for others to be able to come along and follow on our footpath to see what we've looked at. And then finally, acronyms. So that's the wrap on that. Obviously, I need a drink of water. So our next meeting dates are up. Barb, I'm floating this right now. Thursday of May will be the Thursday before the Memorial Day weekend. Do you want to keep it there? Okay. Barb, are you with us? Can anybody hear me?
Yep, I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was. Yes, let's keep it on the Thursday.
Okay. So you're good with the Thursday abutting the Memorial Day weekend. You're good.
Yeah, if we were meeting on Friday, I would change it, but Thursday's okay.
All right.
A lot of people take Friday off.
And then I've got a tickler out to Prism Technologies to see if they'd be willing to come forward to talk to us in April. And then perhaps we can get some more, as you see from the flavor of what Bob will talk about today. Maybe we want to lean forward into the May timeframe and start looking at some advanced technologies and then thinking about how to integrate those thoughts back into what we do going forward. So kind of an open next couple of months after that. If you have ideas for a presentation, by all means, get them over to me. And with that, I think what we want to do at this point is move on to the brief by Ian, unless there's anything from the floor you want to hit me up with right now.
Just myself here, Barb. I like the MNDOT. If we could get, what was his name, Terry?
Yep.
I think that would be a good.
They're actually doing a presentation for the Association of Traffic something or other. It's the GIS subcommittee. It's actually being held here in Minneapolis. They're doing a presentation in April, so I would think that would fold over nicely into May. They could just recycle it. I'll reach out to them and see if they'd be interested in doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're to the point of the agenda where we're going to do the walkthrough of the Group 1 and 2 flow chart. Travis and Brad, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the slide that I inserted, that the most recent one is a version 4. Is that what you'd like to have up? Or Brad, you also sent me a PowerPoint set here. How would you guys like to do this?
Well, the PowerPoint set was just like for the regular, we do the regular
group, yeah,
3-4 meetings. So
yeah, we kind of threw you two guys together here for this one. Sorry.
No, Travis and I kind of got together and this week and talked about this, and it was kind of a stumble through, more opposed to a walkthrough. But and I'm not going to speak for Travis, but he, I've kind of disclaimed this a few times as a 0.04 version is this kind of came from a viewpoint of a city. This is a city person. municipality that owns its utilities and does its design work, and they have a GIS and they have the utilities in GIS, and we are serving stuff out, map services going out to locators. So, and Travis he really pointed out something good is, this is not the only workflow out there. And I think Bob and I kind of thought that, like for what Travis's group is doing, it's more of like the bottom part in green, but I'm probably ignorant of everything. A lot of respect for what Travis has done with his company and the gumption he has and the work he's doing. He's doing thousands of miles of data acquisition a year. And so he definitely fits into that top segment. And it's his workflow for that top part to collect, store, and get the information in is totally different from what we would do as a city. So what we had kind of talked about is, we can walk through it here, but we almost, instead of trying to put everything anybody could possibly do on one page, maybe we need to classify different types of workflows to try at the same spot. So.
I guess my only point was, there is no collection up on the top, and that's where I'm where my viewpoint is, and probably Joe can contribute to this too. But when the guy's out there locating, he's collecting. I'm always under the mind frame, most of the customers I deal with are small municipals that have not even scratched the surface of GIS, and where they get started is not really on this flow chart yet. And so, they're starting with just going out and collecting above ground points, hydrants, valves, such, and then connecting the dots in between by using a locator or just sitting down at their desktop and putting lines and going off of measurements or past data or line cards. And so that's where we need to the audience I always try to address is the guy that knows nothing or coming in at it all green. And I don't, as for the collection part of things, I can see it down in the field operation and locates down in the bottom left-hand corner, but that's after the fact. These guys are also important. The field operations and locates using the data is kind of like putting it, they got autopilot. Everything's already been collected. They can just go out there and go in autopilot. It's the guys that are collecting the information that are also using locators, and they're part of field operations that are probably more important and should be represented up on the top somewhere.
Oh, that's very true and very good point. We, Bob and I looked at it, on the far left, and actually Bob showed it during his presentation. We kind of joked in our subgroup meeting of, I think we all agreed to one degree or another, agreed that, the stuff on the left of this diagram is not that difficult to do, and a lot of us are doing it fine. But the farther you go over to the right, some of us are struggling with that. And we're not doing it all perfectly. And Bob showed that for St. Paul with the dashed lines concept, and I think we were going to play off of that a little bit in the future. So that's a good point. We didn't want to spend hours and hours trying to come up with flowcharts for things that only to find out that we're wrong. It's kind of a waste of time. But it would be good to, we might have to look at different types of workflows for different types of the sectors. And what is collected instead of one page like this that just tackles everything. But from our viewpoint as a city with everything running, it goes left to right. We plan out the projects, and then they enter a design phase. They have standards that they follow if they're using AutoCAD to design the project. And the reason those green lines are running over from the data owner GIS database, we hope they're using our existing data to tie into, which is that third box. When you get to the preliminary and design approval area, you start, starting to work towards finalizing your underground project design. And I wasn't sure that we needed that brown line to connect to the GIS database from that preliminary design and approval box. And someone in my group pointed out, I think it was Keith, said, but some projects last a year or 2 years. And we have an underpass project, railroad underpass project here in Moorhead that's entering its second year. And that's a good point, because over that time, your project changes. The project design changes, what goes in changes. So you do need to keep an eye on that. Construction and inspection part, There's rules, standards, checklists, and specs that we do for how our projects are inspected. You know, Travis brought up the point, we're going through it, that's not even a part of his workflow at all. You know, preliminary design and approval, and you know what actually happens during the construction phase. You know, he comes in long after that for a lot of his clients. So, you know, it shows a different workflow is probably needed. And as Bob and I have both shown, when we get to the as-built portion, we need specs and approvals and standards for as-builts, and those need to be approved before they can go in as, you know, like the final copy into the database. And
I got a little bit of a follow-up here too, Brad. I mean, you know, I'll be the first one to admit that I've been doing this too long. And I'm sure that, you know, I agree with you, Brad, that, and, you know, all the comments that have come already, there's a whole bunch of stuff here to the left side of the chart that I basically thought, all right, do we want to get into that basically low end kind of real, I don't want to call it remedial, but it's that, you know, the very left side of creating the data. I mean, we can put that together and add that into the chart here. I don't know, I would have a hard time trying to figure out where to stop though. You know, how far left do we go?
Bob, give an example by what you mean by that.
Well, you know, we're talking about the project planning there. There's a piece in here and it's probably more kind of integrated with the circle there. And I'm looking at the circle as on the top half of the diagram, it's kind of running clockwise. So the idea is that your GIS data sets are used to start your project planning, and then you kind of work your way to the right as your project design and everything, and it gets built and it's approved and accepted, and that goes back into the data set. That's where I see the data sets being created. But there's this whole other group of people that don't have any system like this currently available, or if they do, it's just kind of a fledgling setup. So building this infrastructure out, this basically this, you know, data management circle is another piece of the equation.
Okay, can I ask this question to you guys since you've looked at this? And we heard the same comment from Ian. Do you vision that if you're looking at that flow, that at some point to get the state to the point where it knows where everything is, that it's going to have to provide some sort of a financial support piece or a mapping agency or whatever you want to call it that provides that for smaller utilities since they don't have the bucks to do it?
I can jump in real quick, Brad, or you're nodding your head like you wanna.
Oh, go ahead, Bob. I'm agreeing.
Yeah, my thing there is the little guys are probably going to need some kind of a subsidy. I mean, they're not going to have. We're pushing it as far as supporting all of this stuff in a larger organization. I count City of St. Paul as a pretty big organization. And we're having problems with keeping up with a lot of stuff. Most of it's just basically that it's all digital, and historically we have kind of underfunded all of our support structures. I mean, we're kind of moving towards realizing what we need, but it's still going to be a while before we actually have enough support for things. The people that don't have anybody that can manage this stuff on a full-time basis or even a part-time basis are going to have problems with keeping up with any extra duties. I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of it is related to building out new systems that have to do with a particular task and learning them, which is why I like to build systems that have a kind of a common look and feel to them that you can leverage for other duties. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but.
So what I'm thinking here is that we're effectively talking about a rural electric association model for the smaller outlying utilities to be able to have the funding to support doing something like this.
Well, I'm not going to speak to all facets of that, but yeah.
Yeah.
The other piece of that is I think there might be some smaller kind of entities inside of inner city organizations as well. There are smaller kind of networks of things. I can give you one that's on the smallish side. Our central heating downtown St. Paul. That's a whole public utility separate from the city. They kind of do their own thing. It's a central heating system for heating all the buildings. Fairly small network, but they're kind of all unto themselves.
Okay.
I've not to go off on a tangent, during the financial crisis of 10 years ago, I was always saying the next too big to fail is some of our infrastructure, especially in the East Coast with overhead power lines and some of the bridges, roads, and underground and sewer separation and water systems and gas. So maybe money for that, Steve, will be in the next COVID bill that comes out as an infrastructure bill. But the Ian had that great chart, and I said that when we were watching his present. Ian had that chart with the Vista workflow of how people are, different sectors are providing all their different data into that Scottish system. And that little Vista chart that he showed, it isn't, shouldn't be confused with this chart here. His chart was working with the data. So what he was showing is basically the higher blue cylinder GIS database going into the lower blue cylinder of the public underground mapping database. But there almost needs to be this is like when you get to sit down and plan out your projects and tie into your existing city. There almost needs to be different workflows for when you've already got stuff in the ground and you don't have anything. You don't have paper, you don't have digital, there's manhole covers out on the streets and you need, people like Travis to come out and help you figure out what's there. That's a totally different workflow than this. So,
well, I think that's the workflow that would develop the GIS database, the top blue bubble. Right. There's a workflow behind that to develop the database to begin with.
Yeah,
I could jump in and attest to the the need for financial support as well. There's also kind of an interesting statistic. Putting my finger on the absolute number is difficult, but for sake of discussion, I would say within Minnesota in particular, approximately 25% of our incorporated municipalities that have city-owned utilities don't actively own or use underground utility locating equipment. That's a really interesting statistic when you think about why. When you ask any of those operators what the reason is for that, it's their inability to get their councils to approve the purchase of that equipment. We're talking $5,000 equipment, and their councils won't approve that out of their O&M budgets. I think that's a pretty good testament towards what type of financial support these communities might need to get on board with this process.
Very interesting insight. Thank you.
There are methods and workflows for being able to use some of these collected data sets like the LiDAR that I was explaining there. There are actually mechanisms for collecting that LiDAR off of the back of a vehicle. So you can collect down a road, the whole road very quickly and have a georeference very nicely. And it'll show any kind of surface structures that you need to get at, all the way down to like a water shutoff or, a gas shutoff. I mean, to that level, assuming you get it at the right time of the year.
So in our group one discussions, we were actually, really trying to move beyond just simply collection of surface attributes and snapping a line between them. We were focusing on kind of that three-dimensional statistic with the XYZ coordinates and at least having depth of cover information on the utility. We have equipment available today that does that. Both Travis, Subsurface Solutions and Utility Logic have that now, that in the hands of a locator, they could be collecting that data and get that true three-dimensional information. In real life, we have significant delineation from straight line between ground level attributes. And then if we're shooting for accuracy, we truly want to be capturing the real life delineation of these utilities as well. Water service lateral is a perfect example. Typically on the drawings, they're drawn at a 90-degree angle to the water main from the curb stop or shutoff. Rarely is that the case. So not only being able to get proper alignment, but then also depth is part of the objective of our group one as well.
And then Brad, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, Dean, by all means, please.
So this workflow chart would be a good example for a municipality that already has most of its data geolocated. And then you mentioned that we would need perhaps a revised chart for a municipality that's starting at ground zero, or at least something substantially less than, say, a city like Moorhead. And we've got plenty of those in Minnesota, as Joe just attested to. So then what about the private sector utility operator, do we need yet a third and fourth flow chart for them, or are those fairly similar to this?
Well, personally, I don't think we're limited to 2 different workflows. There could be quite a few number. I know of, electrical organizations up here that, they have data. It's like, maybe it's an AutoCAD, maybe it's an AutoCAD facsimile, not to a good registered coordinate system. And they don't like sharing it because it's schematical. It's not positionally accurate in the ground. So, and I know our public service utility went through a whole process for the last 10 years of taking, basically schematics in AutoCAD where everything's drawn out, but it is not even close to being positionally accurate. It's just like showing, hey, there's a power line on this street. My aunt's house about 5 blocks away had a fire hydrant in her bathroom. So their water system wasn't that accurate either. So there's another workflow with, they have data, but it might just be on paper, or it might be a digital file that isn't, XY positionally accurate. So there's another workflow for how much of their data do you use going forward, or do you start from scratch and just build it all? But you're right, with private utilities are the same way. They might have a totally different workflow for doing this. And there's scope too. I mean, like Bob and I are limited with, city limits, where, Travis is collecting stuff across multiple states, different areas. He's got a lot of issues to deal with, coordinate system and so forth.
Brad, you bring up a great point, through the GSOC pilot project we're currently working on right now that we haven't dove into, but it's been really surprising for us to find out of every one of these clients that we speak to, public and private. If you ask them about whether or not they have their system mapped in GIS, frequently their answer is yes. But if you break it down further in an effort to determine the accuracy of that information, we find out an extremely small percentage has truly been collected with equipment that offers the level of accuracy everybody likes to think they have. A great portion of that is, legacy drawings and tap cards and information that's been digitized in that in some instances, one local private utility, they've given examples where it's in some instances 30 to 100 feet off. So they may very well have their system mapped, but that doesn't represent the level of accuracy that mapping truly represents either.
That's kind of the perspective that I was taking too, is trying to figure out, and the focus on the last part of my presentation was that, in my mind, that LiDAR side of things is kind of a good starting point for registering things very closely and starting to build your 3D world against, because it acts like a good truth point, I guess you'd say, for locations.
That's a great point, Bob. It would certainly be able to give another reference that their existing GIS information can be compared to determine if they're anywhere near the above ground attributes.
One of the ideas that kind of has been gelling out of my head here while we're talking, and Barb has kind of thought about it a little, I think, as well, but one of the pieces that might go into forwarding a lot of this is maybe trying to figure out a way of either legislating the funding or providing dollars to be able to go out and do like this comprehensive, at least the right-of-way side of it, to get started and get this LiDAR scanning done at these very tight levels that can be reused by everybody in the system to kind of get started. That would be a very good baseline aspect to start putting something together as a model forward for building things against into the future. And it would kind of get people all excited about being able to put their data and see it alongside of all of that 3D side of visualization.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what MNDOT is doing along these lines, right?
Yeah, truthfully, when we bring a new municipal in, I mean, like a size of 1,000, population of 1,000, it takes them 2 days to walk the whole town out together, all the above ground infrastructure, all the hydrants, all the valves. It doesn't take long. So it doesn't require that much to get started. Manpower, that's all it is. It's just, you got to have people, and a lot of them are doing it with just summer help during, that they can train easy enough, or they're doing it during the winter time when they have nothing else to do.
Travis, how much of it do you think is a result of people not being able to have a vision or not have a plan.
Well, that is a lot of it. It's the older nothing against you, Steve, but it's the older workforce that doesn't have the vision. When you go to these rural water conferences, you'll get these 56-year-old guys that have just been used to doing it the same way, and that's just going off of memory. That's where Bob put it in the ground. That's where I know it is, and they don't care about using any GIS whatsoever. And then you get the younger kids that 20, 30-year-olds that are all about GIS, and they're just frustrated because their councils, like Joe was saying, they try to go back and get money or funding for something that the older guys never did. And they those people are older too. And they're like, well, what do we need that for? We've been with it without all these years. We don't need that. But in the reality, it's going to make their work and job so much easier.
Yeah,
that's sitting in, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to just kind of reinforce Travis's point is that Japan has done a great deal of encouragement in utility mapping, underground, all of it, because of this very issue of most of it was built following the Second World War. Guys retiring and they're going out the door without any accurate understanding of what's there. And so, it's an issue. So I'm scribbling. Dean, go ahead.
I was just going to say that just listening to all this conversation now is really getting me thinking. And part of the reason for the formation of this group was that we felt that we needed to develop more damage prevention champions, and that those people were going to come from people with GIS expertise, as well as people who were, legacy involved in the damage prevention portion of the business. Just listening to what everyone has had to say reinforces my thinking that it would be very helpful to have Brad's team, I guess Brad and Travis, put together a simplified workflow chart for the organization that doesn't have its underground infrastructure currently GIS mapped, or at least it's inaccurate or very incomplete. And I think that something like that can become a real tool for Steve and Barb to start talking about the issue and generating support, economic and otherwise, for this.
I think, Dean, that would be the flow chart that, like I said, that feeds into that GIS database.
Yes.
Exactly. Right. So it would tie right into this chart, but it would be another layer of a flow chart.
Okay.
We have success stories. I mean, I know Joe probably is the same. I mean, we have some customers that have been really good at getting up and going that we can use as examples and groundswell it, and hopefully we can use those when they go to the rural water conferences and such to build some momentum publicly. And I think that's just going to take time after that, and it will grow.
We have run long on this discussion. Barb, is there anything more that you'd like to try to kind of like tie up the loose ends on this workflow thought? I mean, Dean's proposed a diagram for, if you will, the small utility that hasn't moved down the road, and then maybe with some brainstorming between 1 and 2, they can maybe identify if there's some other area that they should work to another type diagram or 2.
Yeah, I think this has been good because the two teams have gotten together. I think it's been evolving, and so I'm good with today's discussion.
Okay.
And all the work that was done to get to today, actually.
Got it. Okay. With that, then, I apologize to Brad and Travis. Was there anything, let's start with Travis. Is there anything specific you want to talk about per your group? You're muted.
Sorry, oh my. I just been working with Brad a little bit on the attributes. We addressed that list on that Excel spreadsheet that he had. I don't know if he showed it here before, but I told him that our group will probably just go through that and delete everything that we don't think is pertinent, and then he can do the same with his group, and then we can see where it all falls together, so we can dumb this whole process down.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on to Brad. I know you spent some time putting some slides together. What else? Is there anything else you'd like to do, given we're short on time?
But yeah, go to the next slide then. The next two. But there's just, you wanted us to bring you homework, so our group came up with two of these, an item, a discussion, and a recommendation. You asked us to bring that to the meeting, so I sent you 2 slides. So if you want to skip past those, that's fine. If you just want to read them yourself, Steve, that's okay. That's okay too. So, and I think Adam Worm sent me that one. So, which is really good. And then the last slide was just kind of highlights of our subgroup meeting, which someone had said, as we go through this workflow, some of our largest problems might not be technical. It could just be compliance and buy-in. And the different sectors and stakeholders, utilities, there's different regulations and different levels of mapping in each. And it'd be nice to be on the same level. And I had noticed it from when I called in, when I built a new house and our subdivision was 2 years old. The one call center had no idea where I was. They couldn't find my street. They couldn't find my address. They said that you're not in the system. And someone had said, yes, that's still an ongoing problem today, is getting updated information for new subdivisions for streets and addresses into the system where they issue the one call ticket. We also touched on the pros and cons of virtual white lining. That's not a concept I was familiar with. So I kind of asked some guys in my group, we had a discussion, but I guess the takeaway is that there's a lot of different opinions of just what the heck virtual white lining is. And we echoed Bob's sentiments that a lot of us we're doing stuff on the left-hand side of this chart full, but not so much on the right. So, but that was my update for the week. So thanks, Steve.
Thank
All right,
you.
well,
Thank you. Valerie, you're up. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay.
I got the phone ringing off the wall, and it's one of these things I can't cancel it in here, and it's a
You're
mess.
multitasking.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. So I did not do my homework. Unfortunately, the outreach team has not met yet in March, just due to my schedule and a few events that I've had to manage. But I will be setting up a meeting for our team in April to take place in the next few weeks. So we'll continue to work on, best ways to promote UUMPT and the initiatives. One of the things that I do want to mention that I did talk about during the last month's large group call is Infrastructure Resources did publish an article on UUMPT, which both Steve and Barbara were able to look at and they approved. That will be published on our website in mid-April. We'll also have hard copies that we can send out to people if they would like to get a copy of the article. So that's something that we can look forward to, obviously, in mid-April. And that's it. That's my update.
Thank you, Valerie. Could you make sure that when that gets published, you send it a link to me, and I'll make sure that the group gets it.
I will certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Dean, you're on the floor.
I guess my job is to make sure that we end on time, so I will. Our initial reviews for regulations and securities are basically complete now. We furnished a template for looking at what some existing systems had for attributes already to groups 1 and 2, so that the real work on the next practices can begin for determining attributes and workflows. And now next, I guess for us is to determine with groups 1 and 2 how we can support them and what role we have to play, if any. I think particularly a review of whatever existing data sharing agreements are that we can find, including terms and conditions, perhaps for websites. An example was what Ian from the Scottish Vault suggested as their disclaimer. We also have a few other data sharing agreements to get a look at. And perhaps we can be addressing going forward security concerns and liability concerns, but really need to get some more feedback from groups 1 and 2 as to how we can support them.
I think we also need to get some conversation like from Excel or Centerpoint. Dean, and maybe you and I could start talking with them a bit about their security concerns and how they see going forward.
Is Justin Larson still on? If not, well, we'll reach out. Like, again, we did initiate calls with each of them, but those got tangled up in the bureaucracy, so we'll try again.
I can help you set that. I can help you set that up again.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Dean, have you looked at the Pipes Act?
Years ago, yes.
Okay. All right. So, just in scooting around, looking at some of this stuff, the thing that would be helpful to me in starting the draft work is if we could work towards an Excel spreadsheet and we just start plugging things in. Like Europe is running this thing called, I think it's, if Santosh is on, he may be able to, I think it's 189, Reg 189, originating out of Belgium for the European Union. Be interested to look at what they did there. This Pipes Act thing that's out there, whatever we've got for legislation in Minnesota. Again, if we've got, I've mentioned this before, but if we've got a grid like that we can add to as we go along, as we find stuff, because it seems like we get in discussions with people and they'll say, hey, what about X, Y, or Z reg? Have you taken a look at that? So just a thought.
Okay, well, I mean, we do have a chart existing now, not with any of the sources that you've discussed, so we can get a look at those and plug those in. I can send you what we've got so far on that.
Okay, cool.
But again, I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for true legal regulation that prevents sharing of GIS data within the US, there's not very much.
Okay. And with that, I think we're, Dean, are you done? Any questions for Dean?
Yes.
Going once, going twice, gone. And I'll be so we were supposed to have open discussion. We've kind of wandered through that, but we will open the floor. Are there any burning issues that need to be brought to the forefront? Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, next meeting's April 29th. As usual, I'll send out the calendar notification so you can pop it in, but here's the heads up. That's where it is. So your next small group meeting, at least continue your discussion about what item discussion recommendation things, what kind of list are you starting to develop of items that probably ought to be, massaged along those lines. And maybe it'll start to bubble forward from your group as to, who's got the expertise to handle, item X and who's got the expertise to handle item Y. So there's a consideration there for you to think about. And with that, those who dare not, do not. Anonymous. There we go. Barb, what do you think to close out the meeting?
Well, just another great meeting, a lot of good progress. And Valerie, will you send me an email with your phone number so I can give you a ring?
Sure, no problem.
Thanks, Valerie.
Anything else?
Nope.
Yeah, well, if the chair says we're done, we're done. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.